You know that kind of situation where you feel like a stranger in your own home? Well, my name is Ethan, and that's what happens to me almost every day. My world is divided between two houses, as if I were a piece of paper folded in half. On one side, my mom Amanda's house, and on the other, my dad David's house. The difference between these two worlds is huge. I'd say it's like living on two different planets. At my mom's house, things have never been easy. There, I have to share the space with Frank, her new husband, and his kids. They're anything but welcoming. I try. I make an effort to be nice, act like the good guy, but it never seems to be enough. It's not like they outright hate me, but it's like I'm invisible to them, you know? They don't look at me, don't talk to me, don't care. I try to get close to Frank, act friendly, make jokes, help around the house, but the most I get in return is a nod. And Frank's kids? Oh, they're even more distant. If I show up in a corner of the house, they change direction like I'm a shadow just getting in the way. It feels like there's an invisible wall between me and everyone there. And Amanda, well, my mom is another story. She's always been a bit distant with me, but when Frank came into her life, things got worse. She doesn't seem to care that I feel excluded. It's like all the time she spent with me, raising me, teaching me, just disappeared. What's left is a woman who has a new life now, with Frank and his kids, and I'm just a piece that doesn't fit. Sometimes when I see them interacting, I realize how much of an intruder I am. They laugh together, have fun, share moments that I'll never be a part of. Sometimes I stay in my corner watching all of that, wondering where I went wrong. I tried so hard, tried to fit in, help with everything, make them see me. But none of that seemed to work. Deep down, I know I'm just a reminder of my mom's old life. I'm not her son anymore, just some guy who has to deal with her new life and Frank's. And the most painful part of all this, more than any cold word or indifference, is the fact that my mom doesn't even notice. She never asks if I'm okay, if I need anything. She's just too busy with what's happening in her house, with Frank, with his kids. I feel like a lost decoration, something that should be there, but no one really notices. So, when the week ends and we say goodbye, I go to my dad's house. There, at least, I'm seen. I'm heard. It's not the perfect place, but there, next to David, I feel respected. David has always had this ability to make me feel important, like my opinions and feelings matter. He's never been perfect, but he's always tried to be the best father he could. And that's really all I need. A little affection, some attention. In the end, I'm just a kid trying to find my place in a world that doesn't seem to want me. But for now, I keep making my way between these two houses, trying to figure out where, in the middle of all this, I really belong. I no longer knew what to expect from my mom's house. Every time I arrived there, the weight of being in that environment pressed down on me more. The feeling of being a stranger in the place where I should feel at home was suffocating. Frank and his kids simply ignored me as if I were an invisible presence, and Amanda, well, she was so immersed in her world that she didn't even notice. It was like I was constantly waiting for something that never happened. I tried everything. I cleaned the kitchen without being asked, helped the boys with their homework, even tried to strike up a conversation with Frank. But nothing, absolutely nothing, seemed to be enough to break the cold barrier that surrounded me. I tried so hard to fit in, to be useful, to be seen, but what happened? Nothing. Frank, who was supposed to be the closest person to me, acted like I was a ghost walking around the house. Sometimes he'd look at me and wouldn't even respond to my hi. I didn't understand what was wrong with me, but at the same time, I didn't know if I was making a mistake or if it was them who simply didn't accept me. Frank's kids were even more distant. I could try to interact with them, but soon the conversation would die out. They'd back off every time I got close. I don't know if it was because I was Amanda's son or if there was something else going on, but the fact is, they didn't want me around. I'd sit on the couch, try to watch a movie, but it was impossible not to notice how they looked at each other, like they wanted to exclude me from everything. If one laughed at something, the other laughed along, but I was on the outside, watching, wishing I could be part of that connection that wasn't mine. The days passed, and I felt more invisible. It wasn't just the lack of conversation, but the dense silence that filled every corner of the house. There were no laughs, no games, just an emptiness that seemed to grow as time went by. Even meals became a tense moment. They'd sit at the table, and as usual, Frank and the kids would talk among themselves, but I was left there trying to make sense of that strange, impersonal scene. Once, I made a bold attempt. I suggested we do something together over the weekend. Maybe a trip, a family activity. I thought that at least this would bring some kind of connection, some hope for change. But the reaction was even colder than I imagined. Frank simply shook his head and said, "We're busy, Ethan." And the worst part wasn't the response itself, but the way he said it, like I was asking for something absurd, like my presence was something that could be easily discarded. When night came, the emptiness intensified. I'd go to my room and stay there in silence, staring at the walls, waiting for time to pass faster. I felt bad for feeling this way, but it was impossible to deny the sadness that consumed my whole being. The house was full of people, but I'd never felt so alone. There were days when I wondered if the problem was with me, if I was doing something wrong. But no matter how much I tried to adjust, to fit in, there was no space for me in that place. I knew my mom cared about me, but she was so absorbed in her new life that she couldn't see the pain I was feeling there. I just wanted to be accepted. I just wanted to be part of her family, part of her new life. But instead, I was reduced to a stranger who had to settle for scraps of attention. That's how the days went by. A cycle of failed attempts and constant frustration. Every time I left home to go to school or work, the relief of leaving that environment filled me, but soon the reality of having to come back set in. I tried not to think about how my mom's house made me feel, but it was impossible to escape the pain it caused. I just wanted something to be different, for them to see me, treat me with a little more humanity. But for now, it seemed like that was asking too much. It was an ordinary morning. I woke up, had my coffee, and went to school, just like any other day. Nothing seemed out of place until, when I came back home at the end of the day, something felt off. The house was silent. Normally, Amanda would have at least said hi or something like that, but today the place was devoid of any signs of life. I walked through the living room and didn't hear Frank's kids arguing or listening to music like they always did. I went to the kitchen and noticed something that caught my attention, a note on the table. I thought it was something from Amanda, maybe a message or a quick reminder about what needed to be done around the house. But when I read it, my eyes widened. It was a short and direct note. "We're gone for a few days. Don't come home until Tuesday." That was it. There was nothing else. The shock was immediate. I looked at the note several times, trying to understand what was going on. Had they left? All of them? Amanda, Frank, the kids. Nobody told me anything? It wasn't uncommon for them to forget to inform me about things, but this time it was different. I was there, alone, with no one to ask if everything was okay, not even an explanation for why I was left behind. The feeling of being ignored and abandoned hit a level I never imagined. I stood there, holding the note for a while, trying to process what was happening. That feeling of exclusion wasn't new, but the way they had left me alone this time was cruel, even by their standards. They had simply gone, without saying a word, without including me, asking my opinion, or giving me a heads up. I knew, on some level, I was treated like an intruder, but I never thought they would go as far as leaving me behind without even asking if I wanted to go. As if I were irrelevant, I was furious, but there was something else. A deep pain, cutting, through me in a way I didn't know how to handle. It was clear that, to my mom and her new family, I was nothing more than a burden. They were living their lives, and I was just a detail that could easily be discarded when it was convenient. I felt like a little kid again, the kind who just wants to be loved and accepted, but instead finds a closed gate, ignored by those who should be the greatest support in their life. So what did I do? I stayed. I didn't know what else to do. Instead of leaving, going after them, or trying to fit in somehow, I just stayed home, alone. And as the silence took over the place, I found myself sitting in the living room, staring at the walls, hearing the echo of my own solitude. Not even the TV or music could distract me enough to forget the hole opening inside me. I felt like a ghost in that place. Without purpose, without reason, I didn't know how long I sat there, like a spectator of my own life. But one thing I knew for sure: I didn't want to live like this anymore. Every time I tried to get close to my mom or Frank, the doors would shut in my face. And that day, without warning, all the doors were locked, leaving me outside of everything, as if I had become a shadow that no one needed anymore. The anger building up inside me was strong, but there was something else I couldn't ignore: the feeling of betrayal. No matter how much I tried to convince myself that this was just another one of the many things that happened in my life, I couldn't shake the feeling of abandonment that wrapped itself around me like a heavy cloak. That trip without warning, the way they left me behind, was the breaking point. Something inside me shattered at that moment, and I knew with painful clarity that things would never be the same again. I was tired of waiting for something that would never happen. I was tired of being the last to be remembered, of being treated like my presence didn't matter. They left me alone. And for the first time, I didn't know what to do with this emptiness. I didn't need to think much before making the decision. The next day, even with the weight of anger and pain dragging along with me, I grabbed my backpack and went straight to my dad's house. I didn't inform anyone. Didn't say a word to Amanda or Frank. I simply left. I knew that, at least with David, I wouldn't be treated like an intruder. I knew that, at least with him, I had a place where I felt welcomed, where I truly mattered. When I arrived, the difference was clear. David was always the kind of dad who knew how to listen to me, who made me feel that even if the world outside wasn't interested in me, he was. No matter what happened or what others thought, I would always have a place with him. David's house wasn't big or filled with luxuries, but it was warm. It had life. The walls always seemed to be listening. The doors always open. I knew that here I wasn't just a presence in the corner. I was Ethan, his son, and that made all the difference. He welcomed me at the door with that smile that only he has, and didn't say anything right away, but his eyes said it all. I could see that he knew something was wrong. He didn't need an explanation. He knew enough about me to understand. I went straight to the couch and collapsed, too drained to start a conversation. David sat next to me in silence for a moment. He knew I needed time, so he didn't pressure me. He just sat there, giving me the space I needed to feel that I was in a safe place. This silence, unlike the one at my mom's house, didn't make me feel alone. At David's house, the silence was comfortable. It was a space where you could be who you are without fear of judgment. After a few minutes, he started talking, but it wasn't a direct question. He didn't begin with what happened. He started talking about his day, how things were at work, about the weather. He just spoke as someone who truly cared, someone who knew that what I needed most in that moment was someone who cared, but without putting any pressure on me. Then, when he saw I was more relaxed, he looked at me and with his soft voice asked, "How was your day, son? I saw you didn't seem too well yesterday. Did something happen?" At that moment, I almost couldn't hold back the words. The pain I had been holding inside was about to explode. But at the same time, David's presence calmed me. I didn't have to be perfect there. I didn't have to pretend I was okay. I could finally let the mask fall. I took a deep breath, and somehow the words came out, one after another, like a flood of emotions I had been holding in for so long. They left me, Dad. They left, without telling me. I was left alone. They didn't say anything. They just left, as if I didn't matter, as if I were invisible. I tried, but it seems like I'll never be part of that family. I don't know what to do anymore. The words came out like a confession I didn't even know I needed to make. All this time, I had tried to be strong, as if I could handle everything on my own. But I couldn't. I wasn't strong enough to deal with the pain of being left aside, and in that moment, through David's words, I found what I needed to hear. He looked at me with a gaze that mixed sadness and understanding, but at the same time, something more. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. unconditional support. Son, I know how hard this is for you, and you're not alone. I'm here, and I always will be. This house is yours. You have a place here. None of this is your fault. Sometimes the people we love most don't know how to show it, and the pain you're feeling is real. But I want you to know that as long as you're with me, you'll never be invisible. These words, as simple as they were everything I needed to hear. They relieved me in a way I didn't know was possible. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't lost anymore. There, in that moment, with my dad by my side, I found some peace. We spent the rest of the night talking about small things, those things that, when you're really with someone, don't need big words. Conversations about movies, about the food my mom used to make when she still lived at home, about how the neighbor's dog always made a mess in the yard. Small details that, in that moment, made me realize that sometimes healing comes from the simplest things. At David's house, I didn't need to prove anything. I didn't have to try to fit in. I was simply me, and that was enough. I was starting to feel more at peace. The pain of being left behind was fading, and David's house seemed to be the refuge I so desperately needed. But, as always happens, peace is always interrupted by something you least expect. And that's exactly what happened. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through my phone, when Amanda's number appeared on the screen. It wasn't a surprise. She used to call from time to time, but I wasn't prepared for what was coming. I took a deep breath before answering. The last time we spoke, she hadn't even noticed how distant I had become. But the feeling I had during this call was different. Something was in the air. "Ethan!" Her voice, always with that tone of authority, came through firmly on the other end of the line. "I need to talk to you." I knew deep down that this conversation wouldn't be good. I tried to prepare myself for what was coming. "Hi, Mom. What happened?" I tried to stay calm, but my voice wasn't as controlled as I would have liked. Amanda sighed before speaking. I could feel that she was upset about something, but I couldn't imagine what it was. "I need to know what happened to the money that was in my room. It disappeared while we were gone, and you were the last person in the house. So I just want to understand what happened. Did you take it?" The impact of her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. What was she saying? Was she accusing me of stealing? I knew things between us weren't great, but this was something completely different. I was stunned, speechless for a moment. "Mom, I didn't do anything. I didn't take anything. Are you accusing me of stealing?" I was trying to keep my voice firm, but the lump in my throat was stopping me from thinking straight. What was she saying? How could she believe this? She let out a sarcastic laugh on the other end of the line, as if it were obvious. "I'm not saying you stole it, Ethan. I'm just saying you were there and the money disappeared. We can't ignore that. So if you have any explanation, now's the time." I didn't know whether to feel angry or sad. It was like, once again, I was being treated as the culprit in everything. Always the problematic son, the one who never did things right. I tried to explain again, but Amanda didn't want to listen. She had already made up her mind. Her logic was set. And I didn't matter enough to be heard. "I'm not going back there, Mom." I was firm, more than I thought I'd be. "I'm not going back to a house where I'm treated like I'm a stranger. If you don't trust me, if you think I'm capable of doing something like that, then I don't have anything more to do there." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a moment, I thought she was going to apologize, that she would try to make amends, maybe show some concern. But instead, her voice came back colder and more distant than ever. "So this is how you want to solve everything? You're going to distance yourself from me over this?" I didn't know what else to say. I couldn't pretend everything was okay anymore. I was tired. Tired of being treated like I didn't matter. Tired of being wrongly accused of something I didn't do. It was over. I had made my decision. "I'm not distancing myself, Mom. I'm just deciding not to be part of a life where I'm not welcome. I've tried everything, but it's not working anymore. I don't want to be treated this way. I don't want to be who you want me to be, just to fit into your life. I hung up. I felt like, after that call, things had changed forever between us. I knew there was something in Amanda that would never change. She was so caught up in what she wanted for herself that, in the end, I would always be a disposable detail in her life. I didn't know what would become of me, but one thing was clear. There was no turning back. I had tried everything, and now I was ready to move on. She had chosen her path, and I needed to choose mine. What happened after that call with Amanda was a disturbing silence. I kept thinking about her, about the years I spent trying to make things work, trying to be something I wasn't for her. But more than anything, what consumed me was the accusation. I knew it wasn't just an attempt at manipulation to get me to come back to her house. No, it was something deeper. It was a way to reduce me, to diminish me to something dirty, as if I were the cause of every problem that came up there. And that silence. It just told me she was at peace with the lies she created, but at the same time, I felt like I needed to understand more. I needed to figure out what was really going on, why she was doing this. That's when Frank showed up. I wasn't expecting to see him. When he called and asked to talk, I hesitated. What did he want from me? He had never really cared, always seemed distant, and in some ways manipulative. But there was something in his voice that made me give in. He sounded disturbed. It was as if he was on the verge of something big, something I couldn't even imagine. We met at the park near my house. I was nervous. Frank had never been easy to understand, but something told me he wasn't there. To attack me this time. Ethan, I know things between us haven't been good. I know you feel alone because of how things are with your mom and me. And I'm not naive. I know you're hurt by everything that's happened. But I need you to know something. He paused, as if gathering the courage to say something important. I need to apologize. I was an idiot, Ethan. I, more than anyone, pushed you aside. I didn't know how much I was hurting you. I didn't know what was really going on. I stayed silent, not knowing what to respond. He kept going, but now his words had a weight I wasn't expecting. I went to talk to Amanda about some things, and during the conversation, I found out something that shocked me. Something that made me see everything differently. Amanda. She lied to me about you. She said you were a problem, that you were causing trouble at home, that you didn't respect anyone, that you weren't trying to be part of the family. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Amanda had said so many things about me, things I never imagined she would say. Frank noticed my shock and tried to continue, more serious now. I know this is hard to believe, but Amanda said even worse things. She made me believe you were the problem all along, that you were acting out like you were a threat to our life at home. And I believed her. I judged you without knowing the truth. I was wrong. I was stunned. Frank's words echoed in my mind like a scream of outrage, but also understanding. I didn't know what to feel. Part of me wanted to explode, wanted to scream, but at the same time, there was a sense of relief. Relief because finally someone was listening to me. Someone was seeing the truth. So, everything that happened was a lie? I asked, trying to understand if what Frank was saying really made sense. He nodded, with a look of shame. I didn't know everything. I saw you trying to get close, and I just thought you were doing things wrong, but now I understand. Amanda used you as a scapegoat, Ethan. She did everything she could to push you away. And I, instead of supporting, you believed her lies. I didn't know what to do with this revelation. The weight of Frank's words was still settling in my chest. Everything I had believed about that house, about my mom, was being undone piece by piece. I didn't know what was true anymore. But in the middle of the pain, there was a feeling, a small spark of justice. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't the guilty one. Frank looked at me now with a look of sincere regret and moved a little closer. I'm so sorry, Ethan. I owe you an apology. I was wrong with you, and I'm not asking you to forgive me now, but I hope that one day you can see that I'm not like her. I just didn't know what was going on. I looked at him for a moment, trying to process everything. I didn't know if I was ready to forgive, but the truth was starting to unfold before me. I wasn't the villain in this story. I wasn't the problem. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that maybe things could change for the better. I stood up and gave a small smile, not because I felt completely better, but because for the first time, I wasn't alone in my struggle. Frank had finally understood the truth. And somehow that meant more than I had imagined. I need time, Frank. But thank you for being honest with me. He nodded, a little more relieved, and left, leaving me with my thoughts. I knew the road ahead would be long, filled with discoveries and tough choices, but one thing was clear now. I had the truth on my side. And that, no matter how long it took, was all I really needed. The truth, as always, comes with a weight. It illuminates the dark corners of life, but it also reveals deep cracks, scars that no one wants to see. For me, the truth was a mix of relief and pain, as if the walls I had built around myself were falling one by one and I had to face what was beneath them. When Frank came to me, apologizing and revealing Amanda's lies, I knew something was about to change. But what I didn't expect was how intense Amanda's reaction would be, how full of hatred it would be. I thought, deep down, she might see that she was wrong, that she would realize she had made selfish and harmful choices. But no, Amanda was, in her own world, surrounded by the lies she had told everyone, and she wasn't willing to let go of any of it. It was during a rainy afternoon, while I was at David's house, that the bomb really dropped. David and I were talking about the future, trying to put things on track after all the emotional turmoil when the phone rang. It was Amanda. I hesitated, but David gave me a look that said it all. Answer it. Don't leave things hanging. With a sigh, I picked up the phone and answered, not knowing what to expect. And as I feared, her voice on the other end wasn't one of concern. There was no sign of affection or regret, only accusation. Do you really think you can just walk away from me, Ethan? She sounded cold, almost indifferent, as if everything that had happened was just a simple misunderstanding. Do you think you can turn your back on your mother after everything I've done for you? I felt my blood boil, rage rising like a wave. It was as if, suddenly, everything I had tried to understand and forgive had disappeared. I didn't want to hold back anymore. I had crossed the line. No, Mom, I'm not going to be your bargaining chip anymore. I'm not going to be the one you blame every time something goes wrong. I've done my best, and you just don't want to see me. I'm not the problem, but you never wanted to see that. I expected a response, some kind of reaction, maybe an attempt to convince me to come back, to make me feel guilty for everything. But what she said next was even more unexpected. I know what you did, Ethan. I know very well. You're trying to turn my life upside down, and I won't let you. You stole the money, didn't you? You're the one who did it, and now you're going to pay for it. What she was saying made no sense. The accusation was absurd, and the idea that I was trying to harm her in any way made me feel nauseous. But at that moment, I couldn't hold back anymore. Rage consumed me completely. You're crazy. I didn't do any of that, and you know it. You're just trying to make me look like the villain in a story you made up. I hung up the phone without saying anything else. The silence afterward was deafening. I didn't know what I would do, but I knew one thing. That was the end. I wouldn't go back to that house. I didn't want to be part of her life anymore because, it seemed, she had already made the choice to exclude me. What happened next was something I never imagined. Days later, David called me, telling me that Amanda was filing for a custody revision. She wanted me back in her house, but in a completely different way. She wanted to use the theft accusation as a reason to separate me from David. I was paralyzed. What was Amanda trying to do? Was she really willing to risk everything, even separating me from David, to get control back? I couldn't believe she was throwing all of this at me. I wasn't a child anymore, and she couldn't manipulate the situation the way she used to. But, at that moment, it was as if she was ready to fight to the end, no matter the collateral damage. David didn't take long to react. He was furious, more than I had ever seen him in my life. He filed for full custody because he knew what Amanda was doing, and he knew I was being treated unfairly. The process dragged on for weeks, with Amanda trying to argue and manipulate, but deep down, she knew she had no control over me anymore. The legal battle was tough, but in the end, justice prevailed. The judge ruled in favor of David, granting him full custody of me. I knew that meant I would finally have a home where I could be who I really was, without having to worry about Amanda's lies and manipulations. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the pain deep in my chest. Amanda had lost the battle, and I knew that meant the end of something I still wanted. A mother who loved and accepted me. But that never happened. The divorce between Amanda and Frank was finalized shortly after that. I found out from my grandparents. Frank was completely disillusioned with Amanda and the way she handled everything. I didn't know what I felt about it. Frank had always been the kind of person who seemed to be in the wrong place, trying to do the right thing but never quite managing it. But in the end, everything seemed to fall into place. I had a new beginning. I had David, who gave me unconditional love and support, and Amanda. Amanda was left behind with her lies and manipulations. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. The truth, as painful as it was, gave me the strength to move forward. And with that, I knew I was finally ready to build my own life.